Reports of 2025 are out, candidates having to submit them by last night, and it gives us a picture of where the statewide races stand. And of course, the high-profile race is for that seat on the state Supreme Court. Conservative Brad Schimmel, the former Attorney General and current Circuit Court Judge in Waukesha County, facing off against Liberal candidate Susan Crawford. She is the Dane County Circuit Court Judge. At stake, control of the 7-member court, which currently has that 4-3 Liberal majority, but Liberal Justice Ann Walsh-Bradley is not seeking another term. $50 million was spent on the 2023 state Supreme Court race, making it the most expensive state Supreme Court race ever. And with the new reports out, well, we now have a clearer picture that this race may top that race. In just the first month of 2025, Schimmel raised $2.7 million, 1.7 of that coming from the state Republican Party. Since entering the race in 2023, he's brought in around $5 million. However, Crawford, who just entered late last year, has brought in over $7.5 million since December. That includes $4.8 million in 2025, and almost half of that coming from the state Democratic Party, which is flexing its fundraising muscles again. Remember, no primary in this race next week, so the money is going to keep pouring in until that April 1st election. Now, the other statewide race on the ballot is for Superintendent of the Department of Public Instruction, and the primary for that race 1 week from today. Current Superintendent Jill Underly has two challengers now, Sauk Prairie School District Superintendent Jeff Wright and former teacher and principal and reading advocate Brittany Kinser. And the financials show that Kinser has a huge advantage, just over $500,000 raised. That's more than Underly and Wright combined by a 3-to-1 margin. Let's get some perspective on this. And we welcome in J.R. Ross, of course, the editor of WisPolitics.com. So Kinser with $500,000 in donations. Can you put that in perspective, J.R., in terms of past superintendent races? It seems like a lot of money.
Oh, it's well ahead of anything we've seen before. But really, it's typically a kind of sleepy race. Tony Evers, when he ran for his third term as DPI superintendent, like $170,000, $150,000 at this point. So much, much more for Kinser. And what you're seeing is a coalescing of Republican donors and school choice advocates behind her campaign. In an interview with me in last fall, she calls herself a blue dog Democrat. She attended the Democratic National Convention last year, but she is definitely getting support from those school choice people who see her as a better bet for them than either Underly or Jeff Wright.
Does that say a lot about what her priorities might be if she were to be elected superintendent?
That depends. You know, she's tried to kind of talk about being for improvements in education overall, higher reading standards, those kinds of things. But there's definitely a feeling that the choice people are there for a reason. If they think she's their best bet to have an ally, a friend in the state superintendent's office. I mean, reality is Republicans, conservatives have not had much success in this race pretty much ever. It's been long dominated by the educational interest, teachers, those kinds of folks who are really passionate about the office. Republicans just don't seem to have that kind of motivation to get involved. So this is a new tack for them. The question is, will it work? Then you also have the Supreme Court race, which is kind of overshadowing everything. And will this race get much attention? Even with $500,000, which seems like a lot, that's nothing compared to the Supreme Court cancer and down at the airwaves the next 50 days, whatever it is, to the election.
Well, what the Supreme Court race does do is bring more eyes on that particular part of the ballot, right? So if you go back into 2021, when Jill Underly won her superintendent race, there were about 900,000 votes cast in that. It was the only statewide race, right, JR? So in 2023, the Supreme Court race had 1.9 million votes cast. So there's a lot more people at the polls that will see this. Does that kind of also explain the money that we're seeing come into this superintendent race?
A little bit. I'm kind of curious with the turnout. You know, we just came off an election where Republicans had a good year. Donald Trump won Wisconsin. There was a feeling like he found new voters in rural Wisconsin, made inroads with voters of color in places like Milwaukee, did well on college campuses. Well, guess what? In spring elections, those constituencies don't really turn out high numbers.
Okay.
You see a lot of college-educated suburban voters who are kind of more likely to vote in a spring election because of lower turnout. The question is, will this Trump coalition stay together without him on the ballot? Can Republicans engage those voters, turn out for Trump in November, and keep them coming out this spring? It's going to be a challenge for them. When I started doing this 25 years ago, Republicans had the upper hand in spring elections. There was an older, whiter, more conservative electorate than in November. Things have reversed because now you've got Democrats doing better than the people who turn out in a spring election, who are more likely to turn out regularly, and they have an upper hand, it seems like, a lot of times in these spring races.
It'll be interesting to see, just on the Supreme Court aside, if there is an endorsement from the president. Brad Schimmel had said just up front on Sunday he'd welcome an endorsement if he got one from the president. Speaking of endorsements, back to the DPI race, the governor has not endorsed any of these three candidates in the primary. Is that unusual?
Not really. The governor doesn't endorse in spring races. Now, people have made a lot in Madison of the fact that he not only don't see eye to eye on some things. In fact, he's been critical of Underly on things like the change of the standards for test scores. Mm-hmm. There's a rift there, but the fact he's endorsed isn't that big of a deal because he just doesn't really do it in spring races. And John didn't endorse Janet Protasiewicz in 2023, for example. So it's not really his kind of habit to endorse in spring races.
All right, let's talk about that rift specifically. One of the things that's drawn a lot of attention, Jill Underly came out with a proposal. She wanted $4 billion for public school funding. The governor even said that was too much. He wasn't on board with that. Was that too much of an overreach for her? Could that play against her in terms of voters?
Oh, she's got there's several things that are baggage for her. One, go to Milwaukee, for example. There was a referendum approved last spring. Didn't come out until after the referendum that there had been some failures to file the financial disclosure reports that put funding at risk, state funding at risk for the district, for the reading test scores. I mean, she's got some challenges in Wisconsin. However, she also has the state Democratic Party endorsing her. Remember, political parties can take in unlimited contributions, make unlimited transfers to parties. Looking at the fundraising reports, the state Democratic Party has given about $100,000. Worth noting that Kinser's gotten $200,000 from the state GOP, so both parties are engaged in ways you don't usually see in a DPI race. But Underly has that kind of that ace in the hole that the Democratic Party of Wisconsin is a better fundraising machine than the Republican one is. That could help her a great deal in this race.
All right, if the parties are getting their fingers into this, the question I have for you is, you've talked and interviewed all three candidates here. Which one may have the better shot of working with state government, which, as you and I have discussed many times on this program, is not the easiest thing to do? Do you have a sense on that?
Well, Kinser's trying to walk this line where she is trying to seem like she's not a partisan. Looking at a report suggests she kind of is, right? But she's trying to say that she is this kind of, no, really, I only care about education, performance, reading scores, those kinds. I'm not really worried about this other stuff. Jeff Wright's interesting. His kind of best bet, people told me, was that he got Underly one-on-one. And Underly has ruffled some feathers in the education establishment, and that Wright could piece together a coalition of those who would have to do with Underly's performance and Republicans who would hold their nose and say, I don't really care for Underly, and I want her out of there, so I'll vote for Jeff Wright. Well, now it's a three-way race in the primary. Kinser has the most money. That usually is a good thing for you in a three-way race. Underly's the incumbent, usually a good thing for you. But it's a low turnout race on next week. I mean, there's nothing really else on the ballot. There's nothing statewide on the ballot. There are some local races. It is a true crapshoot who will turn out on the 18th and vote in this election.
All right, JR, we thank you for the insight, and we will visit again as we get closer to the April election for sure.
Anytime.